Alright, let's get this trash off the ground. Today I'll be going over a fair review of High Guardian Spice, and right from the start I'm not having a huge amount of confidence because this is how you'd hold a bow if you'd never actually held a bow before in your life or even seen pictures of people holding bows. And this is not going to be a one-off occurrence because I regularly see characters holding swords sideways. I saw a character forging and working on a sword despite the fact that the pommel, hilt, and handle were already attached, which is not how you fucking work on a sword. Literally, Google is free. You know how to Google something. You could have Googled how this is supposed to look. So zero effort was put into them actually figuring out what the characters are supposed to be looking like while holding weapons. And you can expect that to continue through most of the combat, in which they don't actually seem to know how any of it works. That being said, before I even get into the show, the final battle scene in the last episode was kind of fun to watch. It had decent animation and the fighting was relatively fluid. It had a lot of cliches where people would get into clinches and then push off of each other, but honestly, I may have lowered my standards considerably throughout the course of this anime.
Which you will hone over the course of 3 years. Or 4, or 9, if you're that one kid. What was his name? Doyle. Please be sure to do so before dinner time. Or don't. Drop out, like Doyle. Oh, Doyle! That was his name. The useless one.
Oh boy, this is gonna be an adults are old and unimaginative cartoon, isn't it? And this is exactly how it turns out, because all of the adults and parents are viewed as characters who just don't believe in our heroines. For some reason, Dwarf Girl's parents actively want her to stop getting an education so she could work at home with them. The fuck kind of parents actively discourage someone getting an education? And early on, we're introduced to various characters, including a bratty girl who is so one-note she was completely characterized by her first words.
Yes. Don't worry, I'm here. At ease, pores.
This bodes well.
Fuck subtlety, I guess. And then she openly mocks her other students in classes with the teachers right fucking there. Like, can the teachers not hear her? Are they just letting this happen in the middle of their class they're supposed to be teaching during? Also, centaurs are the only non-human sapients that don't wear pants, and I am convinced that this is a fetish among their people. And I will give credit where credit is due. In episode 2, the first joke that actually made me laugh came up.
If we don't know what the rules are, it's almost like we can do anything.
Sounds like you got a whole lot out of that ethics class this morning.
Thank goodness, if you keep making jokes, eventually one of them's gonna stick. Captain's log. I finished episode 2, and I still don't know what the fuck a guardian is. Presumably, they are some form of monster hunter of some kind. Actual clarification has yet to come. But continuing my journey, I came to episode 3, where they immediately started problems by having the pommel of her sword break. That's right, a sword pommel, something that you regularly might be required to hit your enemy with in combat, broke when it hit a rock. And I realized it was broken before at one point, but even still, it was broken before when someone fell over. The point of a gemstone at the end is usually that it's a really strong diamond or something that could possibly be used as an actual blunt instrument, because there are sword techniques that require you to hit with the pommel. The pommel is not there just as decoration. And in a fantasy setting, the pommel is almost always some kind of magic stone. This one is not. In fact, the handle, pommel, and hilt are the only part that aren't magic. Which you'd imagine that it would be really important for the guard right here to be, you know, magical and unbreakable like the blade is. But I guess we're not so concerned about, you know, keeping our hands. Was this written by George Lucas? Are we gonna see hands flying off? But the reason I'm bringing up episode 3 is because it has a lot of the best examples of shitty things in it. First of all, the sound issue. The sound effects are rare, and when they do come in, they're too loud to be considered balanced or background. Listen to this.
Oh, Rosemary, I'll show you something. But can you promise that we'll get right back to deciding your focus after we—
Yes,
His earring made no sound before, yet when he turns around, it's loud as fuck. Right next to his ear, I might add. And he's barely moving. This is lazy sound design. They just threw in the sound of a bell without considering how loud it should be, when it should play, or if it was needed at all. It would have been too quiet without extra ambient sounds, but this ain't it, Chief. This isn't how you do it. That's one of the biggest issues I found with the sound design, and it's what I couldn't quite put my finger on before when I did my first look. There is no sound. There is loud as fuck background music and them talking. A lot of the ambient sounds simply aren't there, and when they are there, they're usually loud as fuck. Ambient tones are even a good idea. When you're in something that's supposed to be quiet, you can add ambient tones in order to keep it from being totally quiet, because complete silence is unnerving, and just making the background music really loud actually makes it worse. Don't get me wrong, everything has an exception, and you can do quiet well. Look at A Quiet Place. That movie did silence perfectly. It set such a tense atmosphere with it. But the last thing I think they were trying to do with her talking to a teacher was set an atmosphere. Also, real quick,
Some spheres grant eternal life.
you can grant eternal life? Why even add that line? Well, I better not see anyone die of old age or I'm calling bullshit. But onto this conversation that was happening in episode 3, and I'm sorry if it doesn't seem like I'm focusing on the plot, but that's because there isn't one so far. And beyond the fact that Guardians go out and slay monsters occasionally, we really don't know what they do or why they do it. I'm acting under the presumption that they are like hunters and huntresses, in which they are some kind of contractual work or state-licensed pseudo-police. But about their conversation, is him being transgender important? Is any of this dialogue? Is anyone making an emotional or physical development? 3 episodes in and you're still introducing set pieces and no real plot. And if this is comedy, where are the jokes? If this is a slice of life, why all the action? And why no relatable life set pieces? If it's an emotional journey, what are our pro-tags overcoming? And what does their emotional journey have to do with the action that's going on? And I'm sure everyone's going to say you just didn't like the transgender character. No, I actually had no problem with him being transgender. I just wonder why it's important. In fact, I'd follow Snapdragon as a transgender more than I would this teacher, because he actually has an individual hurdle and journey to overcome that could interact with the primary story. But this character only has transgender. In fact, other than just being a teacher wizard, his only character trait seems to be him being transgender, and his only real conversations are about him being transgender. Congratulations, we've circled back around and come to tokenism. His only character trait is transgender, which is, ironically enough, incredibly dehumanizing. Well, let's go over the actual story that was happening here for our 4 main characters in the 3rd episode, because this is really important. Most people give a show 3 episodes as to whether or not it's going to be something they'll enjoy. I certainly do. Rosemary was called to talk about what she was going to be doing during free time, what kind of skills she would be developing. They got distracted with the story and was told she had to decide what she wanted to work on.
I figured out my focus.
What is it?
Swordsing. Gonna swords it up. Not forging, though. Fighting.
Too bad it was just more swording, which isn't a focus. Hitting something with a sword is not a focus. It did nothing for her character. It did nothing for her. She wasn't focusing on any kind of technique. We just got the vague, well, I'm gonna be working on swording. Combat in general seems to be something they know shockingly little about, of how you would prepare for it or how you would work on individual skill sets. It's like the writers just didn't want to be bothered actually showing any of the growth. They'll just make up something that they had done in the past later, which means whatever situation they're in is always going to work out, because they'll just magically have already worked on something that works in this specific situation. But yeah, Parsley fell in a hole. Supposedly used a small hammer in many ways. I guess would have been too expensive to animate.
We found our way out of that bizarro broom closet. We solved a dozen riddles for the grog mob, saved a hornet's marriage, climbed walls, climbed between walls.
Boy, some of that probably would have been interesting, but we only got to see her use the tiny hammer to open 1 door. Supposedly this was to teach her to use the right tool for the right job. But she already fixed a locket in the first fucking episode, so she already knows how to work on fine-tuning things and on larger things, or else she wouldn't be able to accurately or properly forge anything. So we just wasted a fuck ton of time on her journey to discover her skill that she already had. Luckily, Time, likely sensing that there were already 3 other stories happening that had little to no consequence, decided to walk out of the story early and not come back until the actual important part at the end. And then, of course, Sage made a potion, and of course, the rich girl fucked it up, shenanigans happen, and completely out of the blue, an infatuation happens that really kind of came on suddenly. Damn. This show really believes in love at first sight, doesn't it? Here's a spoiler alert, folks. It doesn't exist. Romeo and Juliet was a cautionary tale. But all of that from Sage's storyline, which honestly should have been the main storyline since it's the only one that actually seemed to have any consequence, they discovered the Rot. And oh my god, is this the plot of the series? Finally? Guys, I found the plot! It's under the tree! But let's talk story here. Rose's story didn't go into any kind of detail of what she was lacking or what she needed to work on, and we have little to go on other than she'll just be dicking around with her sword more. Partially learned to use the right tool for the job, that's a lesson she already knew how to do, so that was a complete waste of time, and supposedly her and her teacher are close now despite us not seeing that previously. Time is apparently here just to exist when the story does, which I suppose is probably one of the better character traits. And Sage's one-note interactions with the one-note rich girl started at 100. There was no lead up. It's so cliche it hurts, and every time she's on screen, I know she'll be a plot-pushing contrivance. I knew 100% she was going to mess with the potion. I was pretty sure it was gonna get on the cat, and if it did, I knew he'd become a monster and there would be a chase scene. This is Disney Channel live-action show levels of predictable. We've even got our own comically stupid character who could in no way have survived up until this point. And the plot is only moving forward because people are doing stupid things to push it forward. The dialogue is all over the place too.
Hello? What are you doing in my room?
That can't be the line. That has to be a mistake. It must be, you share that room. And this show seems to be the epitome of telling instead of showing. You're supposed to do it the other way around. It's a visual medium, yet they keep telling us about things that happened and very rarely actually showing us the development of things. It's like they're guiding your hand through every last piece because they think you're a child. In fact, I'm starting to think this was made for children, despite the fact that their ad campaign said the exact opposite of that. And it makes me think that there isn't a real animation budget here because in this scene, her arm comes to rest on very much not the armrest of that chair. And this is not a one-off note. The background, the foreground, and half the stuff in the background all feel like they were pasted together with a glue stick. It's not cohesive. Your art styles not only are different between your characters and the things they'll interact with, but also the background and other parts of the background are different art styles. Just because you had a low animation budget, that doesn't give you the excuse to not show us anything in a show you're making. If you don't have the money to make the show, you shouldn't have made the show, because it's going to come out low quality like this. But then again, you're Crunchyroll, you've got fuck tons of money, and that final animation with the final fight seemed to be very fluid. So that means you very much do have the money, skill, and resources to do good animation, you just chose not to. And it took us until episode 5 when we'd finally hit PG-13 levels, where time said shit, they fed a live rat to a plant, and this almost justifies the warning that you put at the beginning of every single episode, except PG-13 doesn't require a warning like that, and you already said this wasn't an anime for kids. So I'm not giving it to you. The word shit and a rat dying is not impressive. You don't need to be a super adult thing to be good. Barakamon was completely child-friendly, and it was adorably wonderful. It had a great story to it. It had no violence whatsoever and was perfectly appropriate for children, yet it was good. You don't have to be adult to be good. Yet they continually warn me every episode like that's somehow going to be a bonus to them, despite the fact that it's a fucking lie. There's nothing in this show that justifies anything above PG-13. Also, on this, another animation issue I'd like to draw your attention to. The perspective on these pots versus the table isn't even right, meaning they couldn't even get the perspective on this right. There legitimately wasn't a director for this show, was there? Even the layering on the animation is bad. Look at them climbing this wall. It's jarringly bad. Normally, I'd go through the plot and every step-by-step story piece as to where they're going and what they're trying to do, but we're not really going anywhere. We're just moving from set piece to have individual micro-adventures. Yet not enough that I'd be able to call it an adventure because they're not actually going anywhere, they're just training at a school. But finally, we're getting onto the actual plot when they go to a cave. They go to a cave that they have to go into to get some healing waters. It's apparently a perfectly reasonable test that they do every year, and there's always always a class that goes in. They go in, discover that the surface waters are all dried up, so they go down for more potent stuff underneath the layers that students would be allowed to. They encounter some giant golems that are sapient for some obscure reason. Now I wonder why they were dumb enough to run into each other like that. Why did you make the golems sapient? Now, instead of our heroes being bold adventurers claiming lost loot from forgotten defenses, they're thieves who killed the two talking, thinking things that owned it. But yeah, I guess it sucks to be giant diamond golem people. You don't deserve rights, I guess this show has decided. You're a thinking being, but, you know, not enough that they care about you. Then they get trapped, they're forced to do truth or dare to talk to each other because they couldn't write anything more convincing for why trapped people would converse with one another. They finally escaped the dungeon and couldn't help but undermine the seriousness of the tone one last time with the dragon talking. And they go off to help heal a tree with the magic healing water they got. And the girls make the same guess that I did in episode 3. That something is draining magic from the land, and that is going to be the big bad guy. But, of course, an actual bad guy is revealed, saying they're getting too close. And are you telling me that none of the older people who were researching this managed to get that far? You're just getting into your story 7 episodes in? This is not a reasonable way for you to get your heroes involved. Compare it to a comparable series like Ruby. The characters got involved because they got involved in petty crimes that were being committed around that happened to be tangentially related to the big bad guys. In fact, the actual malicious team behind it was revealed in episode 1. They just didn't reveal too much about them. And the characters in Ruby are worked into the story organically because the actual target is the school they are in. Meanwhile, they've shoehorned these girls in by making the enemy obscenely obsessed with a bunch of students who otherwise don't actually fucking know anything. And even if you really wanted this one tree for some obscure reason that is not made clear to us, well-known healing waters from the level of a dungeon that veteran guardians could traverse is the cure for the rot. It's so well known that the prestigious Guardian Academy sends students in every year, and yet it's the cure, and no one fucking tried healing water on the dying forest? The bad guys go out of their way just to kill people who have no idea they exist and are almost 100% not the biggest threat to them. The girls know nothing until the cat girl goes to try to kill them and literally explains the plan practically and starts giving away crucial info. The bad guys are absolute morons start to finish, but only when the heroes are here. Like, why the fuck is the cat trying to negotiate? She has a one-cast spell that she should have opened with before talking. I thought the whole point was that she intended to freeze them in stone and not kill them, you know, kind of take a sideline to that direct action. And the spell even has a massive cast time, so why the hell didn't she cast it immediately when they would be taken by surprise? Or from an angle that they couldn't see her? Now it's even worse that she revealed herself first. And the bad guys insist we mustn't draw attention to ourselves. Then why something as obvious as murder? Why not just destroy or steal the water? That's the only link they have and the only possible cure. It's not like they can go get more for some reason. And you have a person disguised as a cat. It's perfectly believable she'd break something. And there'd be no links to you or your plan. They'd never even know that you have a plan. But instead, the cat girl decides to idly tap a few of them, not kill anyone. Then, as a mage, decides to fight the sword wheeler in melee combat, and the enemy doesn't even follow their own logic. They're criminally stupid. She referred to the leaders of their group by fucking name! A recognizable name! You fool, you will never find out about our evil plan that is being headed by Jeffrey Bezos. He lives in 153 Rich Guy Street. It's right over there. That hill, you can't miss it. Like, holy hell, the bad guys are actively giving away the solutions for the heroes to pick up. Even after the rich girl identifies what type of spell it is and that they need the original sphere in order to undo it, the mage girl immediately breaks the sphere, which I guess is a good thing that that worked, because no one said you needed to break the sphere. She said you needed the original sphere that cast it to undo it. Little bit concerning that your first reaction to that was break. And then, because the plot has to plot, the heroes drop several IQ points. We don't need to tip them off by using the rich girl's contacts? They sent an assassin before you knew who they were. Why don't you use the rich girl's contacts? If we tell anyone, we'll be overheard? And They fucking know that you know! Proper authority would make movement for spies very hard! But luckily during this episode, they did have the second joke that I liked.
Everyone's stoned. It's too...
That better not have been a real bird.
It was decorative.
Moments later.
So it turns out it wasn't a decoration. You got me there. 2 jokes in 12 episodes that made me laugh. Way to go. But back to the story, bafflingly enough, after they decide that it's too risky to tell, you know, trusted, reliable people, or perhaps tell, I don't know, the 3 most powerful people at the academy who are probably, you know, really capable. No need to tell any of those people, or perhaps warn the teachers so that they don't end up getting tricked later and knocked out and locked in a room that's slowly on fire. No, telling anyone that would be unreasonable. So her next plan was to summon a bone-eating demon, trade it something precious in order to hope that it tears a hole in reality so she can make a long-distance call to her dad. No, I'm not making that up. That was the next logical step to this character. Then we violently genre shift into a magical girl transformation so that they can, you know, have that whole thing, even though this wasn't that type of anime before. They're just throwing all the tropes in together in the hopes that they can trick you into thinking this is like something that you already like. I do actually like, though, that they had her kill the dragon. It added serious cost to not controlling your magic properly. And not to mention, it also showed that sometimes the unfortunate result is just the one you have to go with. So props to them for killing something that didn't actually need to die. But very importantly, in episode 11, Professor Caraway learns about the rot, and he himself, despite knowing that it is upsetting the ecosystem, and now him personally, a teacher at the school, knows about it, he doesn't tell anyone either. We're never explained why, though. Then we learned that apparently the cat girl had known that Rose's mom was in witch country from the beginning, and didn't say anything. Why the BS if you had such a clean ace in the hole that could have convinced her to come with you quietly, since that's what you were trying to do? Then the villains, for some obscure reason, ask about who knows about the rot? A whole people were relocated. A fuck ton of people know about it. What the fuck? Just knowing it's a thing is already out, yet the villains are acting like they have to kill anyone who knows? What about the researchers working on it? What about all the other people who know about it? An entire country was evacuated. Lots of people know that this is a thing. But then the shifter attacks Caraway and gets blasted out a window, and Caraway lets him get away because there's something he wants here and he'll be back? You morons can fly! He's injured and has homicidal intent! Go after him! You can still see him! It's a big-ass courtyard! If it was just the cat girl saying, I don't want to draw attention, then I'd believe it's just her not wanting to commit homicide because she doesn't actually want to. But Smokeface already said that you can't let these people draw attention to us. The whole reason they're here to kill them is because, you know, you don't want attention. And you already are drawing attention. You drugged a whole group of teachers intent to kill another. And a handful of students. Disappear so that they can't keep picking up the leads you idiots keep giving them.
You've made such a conspicuous mess. We mustn't call attention to ourselves. Take care not to draw attention to yourselves or which country.
Leave no one to tell the tale. No one out!
Or that. Nope. No one will notice that in the middle of the city during the day. Good secret keeping, team. Episode 12 had a nice finale feeling, but none of the plot leading up to it was any good. It was a fun fight to watch, and I really did like the manic assassin dude. And he honestly seemed to enjoy his job of killing people, and I think it's important that you enjoy what you do. But if I sum up this entire show, it suffers from a lack of content that they tried to hide with the earlier episodes. A lot of their stories didn't actually come together or have anything to do with the later episodes. If you look at something like Gossip, every single mystery they solved, despite it being self-contained in itself, had something to do with everything else. And it stayed on theme throughout the entire series, building up to a grandiose, massive storyline. Every plot point connected one to the other, and they all had something to do with each other, or at least were thematically on point. And the near immediate infatuations that become forced tensions in this show are really, really distracting and frankly cheapen relationships as a whole. If everyone falls in love at the drop of the hat, I'm not going to believe that it's real when it comes up later. But what this really suffers from is idiot plot. For those of you who don't know, idiot plot is a term referring to the idea that a plot only moves forward via the stupidity of other characters. It is a story that cannot move forward unless characters do something stupid and would be solved immediately if everyone involved wasn't an idiot. The fact that no one has learned of the evil plan is insane. Massive stupidity. The fact that they won't tell anyone. Stupid. The enemy getting obscenely loud in the name of keeping quiet while actively getting the girls closer to them by doing so. Stupid. You've won! The water is gone! Disappear and leave them in confusion. There was no reason for the enemy to continue to involve themselves in a really prestigious school that would definitely notice the murder of 4 of its students. 20%, and that's generous. The water dragon death was good. The animation can be pretty when they decide to do action, but the action is undercut by the fact that they don't know anything about how fighting works. All of the characters made stupid decisions to get into the fight and how they're fighting. And no matter how flashy the finale is, none of the plot up until that point made any sense. It's a complete idiot plot from start to finish. And it doesn't even get bonus points for being a unique world because it's not a unique world. Their world design is basic and generic. It's not all that interesting. And 20% is like getting your name right at the top of the paper. I'm glad that you did it right, but I'm not going to give you props on the test for it. And most importantly, this show seems to think it's for older people while all the time treating you like an idiot, constantly warning about things that aren't actually warnings, insisting it's not for kids while having completely PG-13 content. The only thing that I ever could have considered would make this show worth that tag at the beginning warning me about the immature content is that this show is so full of itself it might actually qualify to be labeled with the autofellatio tag. Anyway, be sure to like, share, follow, comment, subscribe, and all those things that help me with the algorithm. And let me know what you think. Did you watch this show? Were you spared that kind of pain? Do you have any legitimate concerns or criticisms of how I went over the series and actual arguments in favor of it? I have nothing wrong with you liking it, but I would like to know if you have real arguments, or if you have decided that I'm not on your side because of politics, which is wrong. Feel free to go down to the comments and be entertainingly angry.
So you're telling me that you want to hold my hand? Sure. Take this one. I swear it's clean.